Hey hey! Today we will talk about a really exciting runestone. It is the most famous out of all of the 2,500 ones we have standing around here in Sweden. I am of course talking about the Rök Runestone. It is also the runestone containing the longest carved rune message in the entire world. It has more than 760 runes and 28 rune rows that runs across its surface. This Viking Age runestone is not without controversy. It has been translated over and over and over again, and new interpretations of its carvings are always popping up. It is a mystical stone withholding a lot of secrets and secret runes, which we have gone over in my previous video about what secret runes are, where many of the examples come from this stone, the Rök Runestone. So if you feel confused about what secret runes are, or why I won't cover them more extensively in this video, I've already gone over them in my last video more thoroughly. So if you want to hear more about that, I recommend going back and watching that video. The Rök Runestone is first and foremost a historical masterpiece. You do not need to be a runologist or an archaeologist or a historian to understand that this is a masterpiece. With its impressive carvings and height, it towers over you and it makes you feel like you are a part of something bigger. The name of the stone is a bit confusing if you speak a Scandinavian language, since the word rök means smoke nowadays. But if you've ever been to Gotland, there's something named Raukar there. A Rauk is a column-like landform in Sweden and Norway, often equivalent to a stack. Rauks often occur in groups, where they are called Raukfält or Raukfields. The limestone Rauks of Gotland in the Baltic Sea are amongst the best known examples. So the name Rauk is the older variation of Rök. So if in the elder Östgötska dialect, where the Rök Runestone can be found, in Östergötland, if that meant a stack of something, or if it was hinting towards big raised stones, we cannot know for certain today. But it is probably connected somehow to this old word, Rauk. The stone is around 2.5 meters above ground, but it also has an additional meter beneath the ground, which makes it very stable, to say the least. It was earlier placed in the wall of the church in Rök, and the stone was placed with great tenderness and care there, and it was not harmed by its placement, which commonly can happen to these runestones if they are placed into a wall. Already during the 1600s in Sweden, the Rök Runestone was being examined by runologists. During the mid-1700s, the stone in the wall was described as a completely unreadable piece of history. I do not blame these runologists. The Rök Runestone is mainly carved with short twig runes. Let me show you the difference between the more commonly used long twig younger footdark and the short twig footdark. And you will also see why these runologists back then probably scratched their heads bloody while trying to read this. Not to mention that they only had access to one of the Rök Runestone sides. It is covered from top to bottom in runes all around. So anything that they actually could read on that one side was very much taken out of its context. As I have talked about in one of my earlier videos about the Sparlösa runestone, the 1800s in Sweden was the big medieval church demolition era, and the old church was torn down in Rök as well. And then came the biggest discovery since the stone was put inside of the wall. When the Rök Runestone came out of that wall, everyone could see that all of the runestone sides were covered in runes. Some more peculiar than others. And can you guess what they did next? They did a drawing of all of the sides of the Rök Runestone, and then they put it right back into the wall of the new church. It took about 20 years until they realized their big mistake and took it down from the wall. So what does this amazing stone with its many peculiar runes tell us? As earlier mentioned, the translations have been varied over the years and experts. The meaning of the translations have also varied. Let's start with the most accepted translation, which is one of the older ones. It goes something like this, translated from modern Swedish. To the memory of Vemod reads these runes that Varin had carved, the father, to memory of the dead son. I tell the young, which of the two spoils of war that was taken 12 times, was taken as spoils of war both at the same instance from man after man. I tell about others who from the 10 generations ago lost their lives by the raid geats, and he died as a consequence of his debt. Then ruled Shodrik the Unafraid, chief of the water warriors, over the coast of the raid geats. Now he is armored upon his geat horse with a shield over his shoulder, the foremost of famous men. I tell of the 12th that was Gunn's horse is being seen giving birth on the battlefield, upon where 20 kings are buried. I say the 13th, which 20 kings sat upon Själland, during 4 winters with 4 names, birthed to 4 brothers, 5 with the name Valke, Rodulf's sons, 5 Reidulf, Rugulf's sons, 5 Heisel, Hord's sons, 5 Gunmund, Björn's sons. Now for the young says completely, after, I tell the young, which a hero of a warrior is born. Vilen it is. He could crush a giant. Vilen it is. Neat. I tell the young, Tor, Sibbe, the watcher of the V, at the age of 19 conceived a son. So yeah, that's a lot of information and a lot of things that we do not understand today at all. The mention of raid geats during the Viking Age is thought to be an ancient way of saying Dane, like Danish people. Sometimes it is used to refer to the whole of Scandinavia during the early Scandinavian Iron Age, but here it would make sense if it was referring to Denmark and Danes as raid geats. With this translation fresh in mind, let's compare it to the newer accepted translation of the carving. Something you can keep in mind is that this newer translation has been done into English straight away, so the names can vary a little bit, but it's the same names. The newer accepted translation of the carving goes something like this. After Vamuth stands these runes, and Varin, the father, made them after the death-doomed son. Let us say as a memory for Odin, which spoils of war there were 2, which 12 times were taken as spoils of war. both from one to another. This let us say as second, who 9 generations ago lost their life in the east, but still decides the matter. Ride the horse did the bold champion, chief of men, over the eastern horizon. Now he sits armed on his horse, his shield strapped, foremost of the famous. Let us say this as a memory for Odin, who because of a wolf has suffered through a woman's sacrifice. Let us say as 12th, where the wolf sees food on the battlefield, where 20 kings lie. This, let us say, as 13th, which 20 kings were on the vast battlefield. Of 4 names born, of 4 brothers, 5 Valkis, sons of Rathulf, 5 Reifulfs, sons of Rogulf, 5 Haisils, son of Haruth, 5 Gunmunds, sons of Bern. And for Odin a memory. Let us say a memory for Odin, there, who is a protector of sanctuaries, for a brother, whom does the wolf redden with blood. Let us say a memory for Odin the young man, to whom is born of an offspring, it is not a lie, who could beat a giant, it is not a lie, fight. That these translations are very different is not an understatement, and there are plenty more of translations out there. These translations have been translated during different times by different people with different context in mind. It isn't the simplest thing to figure out exactly from where do we start on this huge, massive runestone, right? But the experts, they have deemed it to be like this, that you go up from here, here, and then you continue like this until we get to this part. And then we have the sides. And then we have to flip the stone. And then we have to start from the other side. So this is a huge project to even start translating something like this. The second translation, the more modern one, is more of a riddle solving carving, where the translator has gone a lot after answers that could be found in the Eddas. And the first translation we read out loud was another person that bravely just pieced it bit by bit together, probably without any thought of it being written as a riddle at all, or that there would be any answers to these riddles in the Eddas. We do not know which way of looking at this carving is more correct than the other. Both of them gives different parts of a larger puzzle. I do have to say, however, that the first translation is more true to what the runes actually spell out, where the second translation has gotten Odin to come through the runes. I have a very hard time to wrap my head around, and in the first translation they are talking about Reidgeats a lot, where we do have a historical connection to Reidgeats and Denmark, while in the second translation they are talking about a king in the east, which does not make sense if we're talking about Denmark anymore. Maybe where Odin comes in the second translation is the fact that this rune carving has the Elder Futtark Otala runes at the bottom of the stone's backside. So again, these are interpretations of translations. The first one is more accurate to what the runes actually spell out, while the second one is made with a whole other context in mind and a whole other goal. The goal would then be to crack a riddle that can be combined with written sources. It is important to keep an open mind and understanding that one expert will not agree with another, and that different experts have different ways of seeing and interpret history. So even if the first one makes more sense to me, it doesn't mean that I am correct, and it doesn't mean that the second person who has translated is wrong. But I must say, as someone who has read the direct translation into runic Swedish, is mostly why I lean more towards the older translation, since the second one kind of throws in things and context that aren't carved out or spelled out on the stone. One interpretation of the stone is that it is talking about Ragnarök. Another interpretation is that it speaks about environmental changes, where the weather is said to have changed drastically during the Iron Age. The theory about the environmental changes comes from a study that is based upon new archaeological research on how badly Scandinavia was hit by a previous climate disaster with lowered average temperatures, stunted growth, famine, and mass death. What points to this is, for example, the mention of the many winters on top of each other in the runic carving. Before the runestone was erected, several events occurred that must have been very ominous. A powerful solar storm colored the sky in dramatic reds. Crops were hit by an extremely cold summer period. And later a solar eclipse could have occurred just after sunrise. Hey everyone! I just felt like I needed to add this into the video. And it might be a sidetrack, but it is way too interesting for me to let it go. There is another runestone with a very long carving that also mentions the name Sibi and the tales of sea kings and warriors and Denmark. And it is such an interesting sidetrack that I can't let it go, and I want you to know about that stone as well in this video. And that stone is the Karlevi Stone from Öland, Sweden. Öland is the small island just outside of the county of Blekinge in Sweden. The Karlevi Stone is Öland's oldest runestone, and it has been dated to around the end of the 900s. So it is around 100 years after the Rök Runestone has been carved. There is a similarity to the rune carvings when it comes to the before mentioned themes. I am not in any way claiming that they have anything to do with each other per se. The theme, however, made me think of this stone. The Karlevi Stone says something like this. This stone was set after Sibi the Wise, Foldar's son, but his crew set by the island. A hero whose path, as was known, distinguished by the greatest achievements, lies hidden in this burial mound. A more virtuous fighting sea hero will never come to rule over the land in the Danish kingdom. Hidden in this heap is the one who followed the greatest deeds. Most people knew, the Trude's worker of the battles, nor shall a more upright, fighting strong Vagnvidur rule over the land in Denmark, on the vast land of the Sea King. It is interesting that some interpretations and translation has been linked to Odin of the Rök Runestone, as Vidur is also another kenning for Odin, and Trud is the name of a goddess. She is the daughter of Thor. The Rök Runestone mentions happenings taking place before the Karlevi Stone was ever made. But it is interesting and very cool that they kind of follow the same tradition of poetic skaldic language. They talk of Denmark and has both at some point been translated into mentioning Odin, and they also mention the name Sibi. On the Rök Runestone, the name Sibi is hidden in the secret runes on top of the stone. It seems that by connecting these longer rune carvings, we get a little peek into different kingdoms and lineages during the Iron Age. By combining these two runestones, it's almost like a very ancient type of history book. And whatever interpretation or translation that we will have of the Rök Runestone, what we can see is that it is a lot of dedication and hard work for a father in the loving memory of his son that has passed away, today it is still one of the most talked about and well-known runestones in all of Sweden. And at the end of the day, to me that is enough of an explanation why this stone is so remarkable. Because what a legacy to leave behind for your passed away child. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for listening. I appreciate you so much. Bye.